Hello, I'm Mike and welcome to the workshop. And this week's video is going to be a little bit different because it was a rush job, so it's going to be all narrations. So I started here by cutting up some poplar to make the blades of my spears. I'm going to make them in two pieces because A, it's easier, and two, it gives a better effect. So when I have them all sized, I use the internet's favorite trick, the super glue and masking tape trick, to glue them all together. This will allow me then to use one template and have them all be the exact same size when they're cut. So you can see here I'm applying the template just using a bit of Pritt stick or glue stick if you don't want to use the known term. And yeah, this goes pretty quick. This whole video goes very quick. The key with doing work like this is, particularly if you're templating, you want to cut as close to the line as you can. Leave the minimum amount of material that has to be sanded or shaped afterwards. And this is where a little bit of patience does pay off, although I have sped this up 3 or 4 times. And I just get it as close as humanly possible. And then when we're shaped out, we just go onto the belt sander and we can shape them all to be the same size. And here we are at the belt sander. So in a block, I want to shape everything as much as I can. So get all the edges square, get the curves perfect. And this reduces the work I have to do later. So once I have the outside area exactly where I want it to be, I will split them apart. And that's the great thing about the super glue and masking tape trick. It comes apart really quickly with no residual glue or stuff left behind. And the important thing with this, as I'm making them, is because they're being used on stage, I want them to look dangerous but be completely safe. So you'll see there that I rounded over the edges, and I'm going to facet both sides to create the kind of sharpness, we say, of the spear. But again, I'm leaving about 5-6 mil, and I round it over, and we'll create a real sharp effect later on using paint. Just a trick I'll show you in a minute. I think I've shown it before actually. So here I am, I'm just faceting out these. So basically wearing around the same amount either side to create a point in the center. Kind of in dressmaking they're known as darts, but this gives the effect of something that's kind of sharp and dangerous and really effective while it's being very, very safe. And with that done, we're done with the points of the spears and need to move on to the shafts. So the shafts are very simple here. They start off life as just a bit of 4x2 that I had lying around. I cut that down to a square. In this case it was 30 by 30. And then through a little bit of trial and error, I get a perfect octagonal by cutting off the corners. I'll then just knock the edges off this. These flats are very important to what I want to do later on, fitting the head of the spear to the shaft. I'll explain that in a moment. So joining the two of these together is sort of a mix of high detail joinery and not so high detail joinery. So I'm going to create essentially a bridle joint here, and I just find the center on one of my flats, and I'm just going to trace around the spear point. For what we're doing here, it's more than acceptable because it will be covered over, but I want to maximize the amount of glue area that I have in order to make sure that my spear point is nice and well connected, because I don't want a situation where it falls over and it just breaks off. That's part of the reason I use poplar for this, not MDF or something. Just a little bit of integral strength. You can see here I've just traced around that and mark out the area I want to remove, and lickety split, pardon me, we'll just go over to the bandsaw, cut out that pocket, and then we will proceed to use our just chisels to get a nice square edge so everything fits in. And then we'll be using an expanding glue, a PU, or polyurethane glue here, to make sure all those gaps are filled, but I also want to make sure it has a really nice bond. Now this stuff dries really quick, so I want to make sure that it's all nice, straight, square where I want it to be before I put it to the side, because I'll come back in 10 minutes, I won't be able to move it. So the final step here to make our spears is something I've shown before. So I'm going to use some aluminium tape to mimic real steel. It turns out really nice, and it's a very effective way of making a prop. So what I want to make sure is, and you see here, is to burnish it in. Make sure that you're not leaving any pockets. Make sure it gets really well adhered. And I'm just trimming this to suit. And this was a slow process. I did the spear point both sides and down maybe about 7 or 8 inches, just to give the effect that it was a socketed joint. See here, I'm just finishing it off. And later on my fingers worn out of it, so I got a bit of pipe to do my burnishing. But as long as you burnish it into itself, when we do the next step, it just adds to the realism. So with that done, I'm just putting a small piece of tape on either side, about halfway in, folding it over. This is for the painting step, which gives the effect of real metal. It works so well. I didn't come up with it. I actually saw it on Adam Savage's test, I believe. And all we're doing here is creating a resist, essentially. So I have these 2 points, which will be the sharpened points. So it'll be nice, clean metal. And I'm just hitting it with some matte black spray. And I explain this a little better in a second. This is not a talking one, but what I've done here is I've just given the aluminium tape a really light dusting with matte black paint. You're doing exactly what you don't want to do. It's spitting, it's coming out, but it gives you this patina. And because I taped off there, I have a nice sharp edge, so it gives it a nice view on stage. And here I'm doing one of the mad things that you do when making props. I am painting wood to look like wood. In this case, I'm just using some burnt umber acrylic paint and just applying with a cloth, because I feel in this situation it just gave me the most realistic results. And you can see there that does look like something that's, well, maybe made of mahogany or something, and looks pretty sweet. Now I only need another 96 and I can have a whole centurion. And then it's off to war. Thank you as always for staying to the end of the video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And absolutely do try this at home.